Tyler White, Senior De La Salle. Great to meet you, Mr.
Wonderful.
Brooks.
I'm Sam Brooks, and indeed a pleasure.
Yes. You've had a lot of positions within your lifetime, oftentimes as the first. How was that for your personal development?
Well, I think it helped because I started life living with my grandmother, and she was always of the opinion, if you want to make $1 million, I always told her about I wanted to make $1 million. If you want to make $1 million, you should ask somebody that made $1 million. So I was always about talking to people to ask them how they got to where they were and what did they encounter and what made them continue to focus on what they're doing. My life has always been about asking people things. And I think it's helped.
Yeah. What was your first impression of Northeast Alberta? I mean, what did you see in terms of challenges, untapped potential, and why did you decide to involve yourself in this area particularly?
Well, first of all, I was all about trying to create an environment in Portland that was inclusive.
Yes.
Part of our philosophy now is everybody's in and nobody's out.
Yeah. So you must have felt, not to interrupt you, that Portland in general was not inclusive.
Well, I'll tell you how inclusive. I didn't know if it was planned, but I know that I came to Portland on the day that I turned 21 in 1968, and my ship was down at Swan Island, and we went downtown Portland. I'm in the Navy. I got a uniform, and I'm walking all through downtown Portland, and I don't see anybody downtown Portland that's black. So I stopped somebody on the street and said, "Are there any black people in Portland?" And somebody said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm down at Swan Island. My ship is down there. I'm in the Navy." "Oh, well, you should go over there. There's actually a club over in Northeast called the Cotton Club, and there's a place where all kinds of people hang out." So I had a sense from then, and I went back to Vietnam again after that, but I had a sense that there were not a lot of black people or much diversity because you didn't have a lot of Latinos here. You didn't have a lot of Asians here then. It just were not a lot of people other than white people. But I had been in the Navy all over the world and seen all kinds of people, met lots of people. So when I came here to live, mine was to look that they ought to change things where people are interacting with each other. And I started looking, if you look at what is Martin Luther King now, used to be Union Avenue.
Yes, my grandma always calls it that.
Yeah, Union Avenue. Well, Union Avenue is actually a highway.
Yes.
It's actually, it's not a street. People think MLK is actually a highway.
Yeah, 99 East.
That's right. Most people don't even know that. Oh, it's not a street, it's a highway. And I started looking, and Alberta seemed to me like a perfect place because if it begins at MLK, or Union Avenue then, and it stops at 33rd. And unlike MLK, which is two direction on the street both ways. On Alberta, you can stand on one side of the street and carry on with a conversation with a person right across the street because it only has traffic going one way and one on the other, on either side. So it seemed to me this would be, and there were African American businesses all along. And it had been historically in the 30s and 40s a place of Germans, Scandinavians, and so forth. So there had been some diversity, although maybe a different kind of diversity. So I thought that's a place that might be the place that you could create some new diversity. And that was the beginning of trying to put something together that maybe could capture that.
Tell me about Project Alberta and the Portland Development Commission, and do you have any resentment towards PDC for not approving Project Alberta?
Well, Project Alberta actually came up with participation by, once we discovered that Alberta Street seemed to be a key street to do things that we wanted to do, there was a guy by the name of, I finally remembered his name, Omar Barbarossa.
Okay.
A Latino guy was the head of...
I saw him in the requisition you showed me.
Omar Barbarossa. And we told him that, we had this idea about Alberta Street. Latino guy, he said, "It's a great idea. I'll see what I can do to get some money for you and to put it together." And he did. He was really fantastic. Unfortunately, Omar was a little on the wild side sometime, and ultimately was terminated at the PDC.
Oh, no.
He was ultimately terminated. But he did help pull it together. We got a consultant to work with us. So in one regard, PDC was great because Omar was there and bought our idea and put money in to make things go.
Yes.
Had a consultant that was to work with us for 3 years.
Wow.
But then we started to get things going, and we did the survey of all the businesses in the corridor. We had a plan. We went to the Economic Development Commission, the Federal Economic Development, and we got $500,000, and we did the survey. Every business in the corridor, we were ready to go.
Wow.
At that point, true to probably who they are and what they do, the Portland Development Commission said, well, we are the development arm.
Yes, you're doing our job
for the city, so we'll take over the coordination. And at that point, we had Bank of America, McDonald's Corporation, we had all those folks ready to move into a building that we have now in photos on the wall that was going to be the entryway to the Alberta corridor.
Wow.
All dropped because they said, we will take over this and run it, and I thought, well, it's our project and what we want to see done. But if it gets done, I don't think you ought to be too hung up about it if it gets done.
That's a very mature mindset.
Because, in the end, it doesn't belong to you anyway.
Yes.
But the worst part out of all of that, as they begun to, they pretty much exercise that same approach in doing things. For some people, they remember the little store that's at 9th in Alberta, still there now, Jack's Chicken.
Yes.
That was Jack Chung. Jack wanted to be in, and he wanted to be in the building, and there's kind of the same attitude with Jack. We'll coordinate the deal with you to put together, because Jack wanted, to buy it for, I don't know, $400,000, the property where he is, down at the entryway where Adidas used to be at one point, right at the entryway of MLK. And the PDC or now Prosper Portland, they're a development entity. And the style in those days was, if it's going to happen, we will coordinate its development. And the rest of you kind of, stand back because that's what we do. I can see it when that's what you do, but we had a great idea.
Yes.
And how I know we have a great idea? Because it's happened anyway. We just weren't in it, and we don't have the diversity that we should have.
Yes.
But the idea has been implemented. What we thought we would have would be European Americans, African Americans, Latinos, Asians, all. We made out of our loan fund, some of the first loans ever made in the Alberta corridor to get minority businesses started. But the big thing that happened is that the people who were in the Pearl, when the Pearl became out-pearled,
yes,
and the folks who were in the Pearl before couldn't afford to be in the Pearl anymore,
yes,
and they looked over at the Alberta corridor and said, this is perfect.
Yes.
Well, that's what we said too. And they started moving in and buying property and doing things, and it got done, but it wasn't the original idea.
Gotcha.
Less diversity. In fact, not very much diversity at all. And some of the things that were said by people was not very nice. I remember at one point someone said, this was mostly African Americans in this community a few years ago. They said, well, we're here now. We run this. So that didn't go over very well.
Yes.
But, over time, it's become quite the place to be, the Alberta corridor. It's still that we don't have the diversity because a lot of those people, whether it's Coast Industries or Joe's Place, any of those folks that were along the Alberta corridor, they're either now passed on,
yes,
or they no longer own the properties. So we didn't get the original concept down, but the idea of an excitement that we wanted to have and have minorities involved, that occurred.
Yes. So what was the attitude when you walked into PDC with this idea as a black male, and you saying that when you first came to Portland and asking people, where are the black people? Do you think that they were responsive towards your identity, or did you feel like there was some backlash, feeling as if
No, I don't think there were. I don't think they were negative. I think at that point in time, because we had Omar Barbarossa, who was the economic development director for a period of time. And of course, as a Latino, he was just very excited about the idea of having a diversity along the Alberta corridor, and that's what it was all going to be about. I think most of the issues with the Portland Development, because one of the executive director for the PDC, Patrick Lacrosse, was the person who helped Owami get its first place to be, even before we got to Alberta Street. So the PDC, generally speaking, but what had happened generally was that the PDC, as the economic development entity for the city of Portland, likes to be the economic development entity. So you almost know that when you take your idea, good idea or bad idea, if it's a good idea, they'll just take it, and if it's good, and they'll take it and run with it. And if they don't think it's a good idea, it might just stop there. But they did stay on board and helped until we got to the point that other people, particularly the national body, had said it's a good idea. And some of the folks who were the staff people had looked and just simply said, well, you know, the response from the community was, and we went to these old people in the community and started telling them our idea, they actually liked it. They said, because you're not the first one that thought it. We had this in the 40s and 50s, because they did. It just wasn't African Americans and Latinos and Asians. It was different with Germans and Scandinavians and other people. But they could see the idea of putting diversity could be a valuable tool, because they really had done that, different group. And so when I started explaining to them, they could see that, that might work. Okay, we can do it. And we started asking people that own property, even in the Alberta corridor, that were in California and other places, and we give them the idea, they were prepared to actually donate their land to the idea that we had. But we didn't have enough money. It was going to take some millions to put the whole thing together, and that wasn't forthcoming. So we did it a different way. The way we did it was to get people who really wanted to move in, or who had some money and wanted to develop, to start doing it. And most of that didn't involve minorities. And some of the folks who had property didn't have enough money to do the kind of development that would have taken to make a significant difference in the Alberta corridor. So that's why you look in the Alberta corridor now and you don't see, I mean, people, Mr. Sevier across the street, who's passed on. When I was here, we would be at 5 o'clock out in the morning sweeping our parking lot off and talking to each other across the street. And I remember just before he died, he asked me to come over and talk. He said, you know, I'm talking to my family. He said, you know, I still have great ideas. My ideas are as good as they ever were. He said, but I just don't have the same physical ability now. And I talk to people and they don't listen to me. And I said, well, I'm listening to you. And because he was cool, I figured anybody that started a business in 1954, way back then, there was a lot of things going on. You got into where it's a good person to listen to. And then for people who are in the community, people pass by not knowing. If you go further down Alberta to Albina, Neil Kelly Company. Neil Kelly, we were planning on Owami opening its offices here. We didn't have enough money to put carpet on the floor. I had to go to Washington, D.C. I came back. He had donated all the carpet for this entire building. So there were partnership things going on, and that's the way life is. If nothing else, you learn that there are good people making things happen all the time. I'm a student of Black history, so when people talk about Harriet Tubman couldn't have gotten the things done that she did if she didn't get help from white people. Now, there were a whole bunch of white people hanging people and doing all kinds of things, but she also had good people helping her out. So I'm always of that opinion. If I can find the good people, I'll just concentrate on them and I'll skip the others. So you always have that going on. Anywhere you go in life, if there are people that don't agree with you, people opposed to what you're doing, recognize there's somebody in the room that does agree and will support you. Try to find out who they are and stick with them, scratch the other people. So that's been what along the Alberta corridor. It didn't go my way, or the Owami way as we had drawn things up, but it's turned out not too bad, not too bad. We have some people that are still here, but we've lost some of the older people who were really excited about it. I have a list of all the people who were on the committee way back then. Most of them are gone. So that's life.
That is life.
That's life.
When did you first start to notice the gentrification that was happening on Alberta?
Right away. When we first saw, there was a young man, probably about your age, I would imagine, where I guess they've taken it down now because nobody has a phone booth anymore. People got their own phone.
Yes.
But there used to be a phone booth right where Jack's is, where Jack's Chicken is, the little store there. And he got shot in the phone booth. And that kind of put a damper on people coming along the Alberta corridor. You know, people didn't even want to drive along Alberta Street, let alone walk. And that was a sign of when things had changed, when you start noticing people going out for a little run in the morning with their little dogs and all that. It's changing.
It's changing.
It's changing. So you notice things like that. When things begin to change, you notice little things. When people, you know, if they come through, the windows are up and they're driving pretty brisk to get through, and they're not living right on. Just a lot of vacancies, because I got the list of everything that went on. A lot of vacancies on there. When that starts to change, people getting properties at a pretty good price, they're opening up little shops, it's changing. And you would probably do well to get a piece of it and hold on to it. And, Rosalind did a very good job of development along the Alberta corridor. She's very smart.
Yes.
Buy it and hold on. Because I always tell people, one of the things I can tell you for sure, God is not making any new land. True. Maybe another house gets burned down, but land will still be here. So if you get a hold of land, hold on to it. At some point, it would be worth it. So, and that was our idea. If we could get the land and secure it, at some point we'd be able to do whatever we wanted to, because land will always is either extremely valuable or will become extremely valuable. And for people that look, our headquarters, Owami, was on Vancouver and Williams. And if you look over there now, look at the building, look where our building was before. That's a 5-story building now. Okay? And those were folks that, African Americans mostly, that moved from down south to come out to work in the shipyards, bought homes, developed them, but when they died, unfortunately, way too many of the families sold the land at a good price and improvement on what they got it, but nowhere near what the people who bought it from them were able to get out of it. And so we look at along Vancouver, Williams, Mississippi, you don't see very many African Americans now.
You do not.
That's what has happened. So my presentation to people have always been, don't sell the land. If your parents leave the land to you, hold on to it. And as I'm getting older, with our property here, we're putting it in a trust so that the kids can get what they get, but they can't do any more with it than what I allow them to do. Yeah. And say, I won't be here to see what they do, but it will always be the law, and they'll dictate to them what they can do. Because I hate to see so many African Americans that have worked very hard in the 40s and 50s to get property and have lost it.
Sorry to cut. That was really good, and there's a plane.
Helicopter or something, yeah.
Well, we want to hear you say that again, because that was really powerful. So once it's gone, maybe just if you could say again about how important it is to hang on to the land and is it gone? Yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah, I really would encourage African Americans, or any group but particularly African Americans, when you have property that your parents or relatives left to you, to hold on to it, because that really is your future. Because other people will come along and grab that property, and even when they compensate you, it's not going to be near anywhere what it's going to be further on in life. So hold on to the property.
So how do you feel those changes that you described of seeing people running and going out on walks with their dogs and people coming up to buy property, how do you feel that impacted you and other Black-owned businesses and Black business people in this neighborhood?
Well, people would talk about it. You know, people out and say, well, I know the neighborhood's changing now. We see people out for their little runs in the community in the morning. You know things have changed. Well, how I look at things, and it's been very good for me, I've been a successful business person, is that rather than me arguing about, it's like political parties, some people don't like the other political party. I go, how I think about things is how they do it and how can I take advantage of whatever it is they're doing. That's what I want to spend my time on. I don't want to spend my time on arguing that a given person has done something bad, maybe even, or not bad, but is taking advantage of a situation to get them ahead. I want to figure out how they managed to get that done, because some people say the same thing about me. They said, you know, when you bought this property, did you know that you probably knew 20 years later it's going to be worth a lot more? I go, like, really? Yeah. I knew that it was going to be, I hoped. My thoughts were that things changed. We bought our house in the Concordia neighborhood.
That's where I live now.
Oh, you live in Concordia? Yeah. I live right on 23rd.
I live on 33rd.
Yeah, there you go. So we bought our house back in 1976. Okay. And that property then was $25,000. $25,000. And that's great.
Yeah, I cannot imagine that.
Today the property, we've done improvements over the years, but the property worth over $600,000. Now, well, all we did was do some improvements. You know, we had put a deck here, you had a few things, but we held on to it because everything in the neighborhood has changed. Yeah. But if you get in there and say you got to where from the 25,000 you got to 100,000, somebody said, oh, well, I'm making 75,000. I'm going to sell and take the money. Well, you forgot. In order to get into another house, you're going to have to pay to get in. It might be even more. And that's what's happened. An awful lot has happened to African Americans in properties. The properties have gotten out of their hand, and they should have stayed in their hands.
Seeing that you foresaw many of the waves of the economic investment and community displacement that's happened, how do you grapple with how certain communities were impacted, were benefited? Do you see that as a positive or a negative thing?
Well, you could make a negative out of, because, you know, sometimes in our African American community, people said, you know, look at people who have come here later and got ahead. Mm-hmm. Well, I grew up in the South, and I know that in the South, everybody worked. I mean, you look down, people had farms, they had lots of land, although they've lost a lot of it over the years because the next generation decide you'd much rather be getting a degree in engineering or something and go to work for Intel or whatever and drive a Beamer and go back and work people had the only store in town or the only mortician in town, and you were working all the time to make money out of it. But those businesses, but that puts you in the place. I mean, the people who supported Martin Luther King, given this is the 50th anniversary today, were people who were old senior people, because he was the young person out there saying the things that need to be said, and they were spending the money, so he couldn't be working a job. He was out there doing what needed to be done. There were people that supported him. And that's why we should be doing more now to support young African Americans who are willing to put in the effort, and the rest of us have our day job. We go in, we get a paycheck every week, but we're helping you make the difference. That's where it was. And so Portland didn't have as much of that as we should have had. And we still need to have more of it even now.
Mm-hmm. What was the inception of OAMI?
OAMI I was the national chairman for Small Business Development Advisory Board in the United States from 1986 to 1989. And part of our job was to look at small business issues around the United States and to report to the SBA administrator, the Congress, the president on what was things that affected small business. And I saw, everywhere from Montpelier, Vermont, to Scottsdale, Arizona, to Austin, Texas, we're all over the country looking at things. And I saw and talked to people, since I was the first African American in the country to ever be on that board, it was like if we came into New Hampshire, or we came into Boston, and they already introduced people. They'd introduce people. I don't know if I was always the last person who got introduced or what, but it was like when I was introduced, it was like, because people had never seen an African American on that board. And usually what I got after the meetings when the board made its presentation is people wanted to talk to me afterwards, and they'd like me to meet with them at their house and talk to them about what was going on and what we could help them with. So
they felt empowered by it.
Absolutely, to see an African American on the national board where the decisions about where the money is going to be spent. So they would want me to come to their house and talk about what was working. I want to tell you what's really going on in this town, and I would go by and talk to them. I remember that the second year I was on the national board, and I was the chairman, and my first act was to hold my first meeting at Howard University. And the board said, why are we going to Howard? And I said, who makes the decision about where the board goes? They said, the chair. I said, exactly. And I'm the chair. So that's where we're going. Mm-hmm. And then I immediately went up to Howard and met with the woman who was in charge of the Small Business Development Center on the campus. He said, I'm bringing the board up. Howard actually was the first small business development center in the United States. Most nobody remembered that. I said, I'm bringing the board up here. Don't make me look bad. I said, because we may never get back up here again. Yes. So I'm bringing the board up. And so, because Howard then had the Howard Inn on the campus. They had a hotel on the campus of Howard University. And they had a restaurant, everything. So I brought the full board up to Howard University, and they really put on showtime. The luncheon they had everything. Sweet potato pie, pecan pie, they had it all. And the folks after that, when we left, they went, can we go back to Howard? That was the change. Can we go back to Howard next time? I said, no, we're going somewhere else now. But we helped out I've had to do that a lot, push the envelope a little bit.
Yes.
But that's what I think, you as you go into your life, when you find yourself in a position to make a difference, do so.
Do so. Yeah.
It's okay if people don't want to do it, stand up. And that's what I did. I've always tried to do that. What's the only reason, the value in having you in high positions if you don't do something with it?
Amen.
Because I don't mind people beating me up. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. So then that kind of connection of bringing people who had institutional power into places with minority communities was kind of...
It was a good idea. Exactly. And I came back to Oregon, and I talked to people I knew and told them I had an idea about creating an organization that where everybody was in and nobody was out. And most people say, well, that sounds like a good idea, Sam, but I don't think that'll work.
Did you have your own doubts as well?
No, never did. I never have doubts about anything I do.
Wow.
I don't have ever any doubts. My wife sometimes, are you always, she tells me all the time, she says, you just get me with all this optimism, So I have her to calm me down with too much. You always have too much optimism.
Yes.
So I started talking to people, and I got a few people. I think my first meeting with Awami, there were 8 people present. Today we have 850. So, it's worked.
It has worked.
It's worked. And there were people who, once you start getting some things done, people start taking a harder look. The first grant that we got was from the foundation in Minneapolis. I had a woman from Minneapolis call me in the morning about 5:30 in the morning and said, how would you like, Bobby Henry, that was her name. She said, how'd you like some money? I go, who is this? And she said, Bobby. I said, Bobby who? She said, Bobby Henry. In Minneapolis, I met you a year ago at a conference. I go, oh yeah. She said, I always hear people talking about they have ideas and gonna do stuff, and I go, here's another person blowing smoke. I look in the Federal Reserve paper and you've actually set up the loan fund you were talking about. So I would like to come down and talk about putting some money into what you're doing. I said, okay. She flew down and went to lunch, and we talked about it, and she said, if you were going to, what would you think about getting some money for your organization? I said, well, technical assistance and capital are the two things that help a business to be successful. I said, well, I agree with that. She said, it takes both of them, and probably if you had said anything other than that, I probably wouldn't be giving you anything. I said, okay, good. And she said, and if you were going to get some money from us, how much money would you be looking for? You know, that caused me to think. And I said, if you were giving some money, how much would you be giving? And she said, if we were giving money, it would probably be about $250,000. I said, that's the exact amount I was going to say. And we ended up getting the $250,000.
In what ways do you feel your vision for Project Alberta and for Alberta Street was realized?
It was never fully realized in the manner that we wanted it to be realized, but it was realized in that it was a good concept when people decided that the Alberta Corridor was a great place for people to be, and they understood it being a great place for the same reasons that we understood it to be a great place. It is a street where people can communicate with each other from one side of the street for other people. I mean, it's just that you can create a dynamics. It's not like MLK, which is a highway. You can't stand on one side of the street on Alberta and on MLK and have a conversation with a person on the other side. You can't even hear. But here people can just stand out and it's like neighbors next door. Hey, what's happening over there? You know? And if you get so engaged, you might even just walk across the street and talk to a person. That's Alberta Street. And you know, when they have the business nights at the last Thursday, yes. Everybody's having fun. You can't do that on MLK. It's the right street to do that. And it's a tight street, again, for the reasons. It's only it's actually 28 business blocks long because the business blocks stop at 28th and the whole street stops at 33rd. So it's a good, compact place to do business. There's very few of those spots along. Business streets usually continue on. It stops at 33rd. It's a great location.
Yes. Do you still feel like it has the potential to be that spot of inclusivity that you had mentioned before?
Oh, yeah.
For people of color, for women, for small business owners?
Absolutely. Because properties, the thing about living is eventually you will stop living. And when an opportunity presents itself, and there are some people doing it, African Americans, other minority groups, women, whoever it happens to be that are concerned, have to take advantage of it. I mean, I see things happening all the time. We moved our headquarters from OAMI, from being on Vancouver and Williams, out to Delta Park now. We love Delta Park. Delta Park is a great spot because it's out there where the park is. It's kind of when you get in there where there is Lowe's, Dick's, all those places right there. It's all a little conglomeration of businesses. Yes. And now we even have, TriMet has put a bus service out. So we were wondering in our building out there, because there was no bus service. We talked to TriMet and we finally got a bus service, stops right in front of the building. Picks up people going. It's great. You have to just look for opportunities and grasp them. And that's what we need out of. Really, it's your generation that has to do that. Because people in my generation, the best we can do is help you do it. Because I'm not going to grow, or I may invest in some things. I like making money. I may invest in some things, but I'm not going to go back and create a business, grow a business. My wife and I are in our 70s. We're enjoying life. Our job now is to help the next generation.
Where do you see Alberta in 10 years? I know you spoke a lot about how it's on the young generation seizing opportunities.
It will, exactly.
What does that look like?
It will look like the place that we wanted if young people decide that they want to invest the resources they have and that they can be influenced by with their parents or relatives. Or I think maybe we may be improving somewhat in our elected officials. We need to have more elected officials, particularly people of color that are elected, whether that's, because if you look at my little list of people that were on, I look back now and said, wow, how did we do this? as I was showing you earlier. We had the governor's office, the county chair. We had, which was McCoy, who was the county chair, the African American, the head of the county, the city, the mayor, Bud Clark. All these people were on the committee. They believed in this. But, you know, most of them, all those folks are gone. So now when the young people who can do some things get elected to city council, become a county elected official on Metro, you become a head of a bureau, you need to do all you can do to help people and organizations that are trying to do things. That would make the difference. That's what has to happen. And we have smart young people. You know, I have a daughter still here who's on the executive committee of the Chamber of Commerce. She's a young person. Those young people need to help make a difference. You guys are the future. The best I can do is help you.
What do you think it is important? I'm so sorry. I need to read this.
Oh yeah, so yeah, maybe read that over and you can
Okay.
comment however.
Got you. Okay, this is the question we were talking about earlier. So you're talking about how it's the job of young people to really take these opportunities, seize it, use our resources to do that. What is some advice that you could give to a young person such as myself about to go off to college, really interested in becoming involved in politics and policy? What is one key aspect or that I should know or that I should be aware of as I'm going and inserting myself into these different arenas?
You should know that there are successful people in the world, and one thing that all successful people have is that they can't wait to tell somebody else what they had to do to become successful.
Yes.
I can tell you that for sure. Bill Nato here in Atlanta was one of my mentors because they've gone through it, and if you listen to them, yours won't be exactly there. So it is not as that they tell you and you go do what they've done. They give you an idea of a process, and from that you figure out what you need to do in your process to get done that you want to do. So I think for what I'd like to see out of young people is to make sure that whether you're in college or participating in some fraternity or sorority, ask questions. Absolutely ask questions, because there are a lot of people who've done a lot and they know a lot and they're willing to share. We have a thing at Owami that we tell people when they come. Don't try to know everybody in the room. We got 200 people at 7 o'clock in the morning. Pick out 2 or 3 people at every meeting and go meet with those 2 or 3 people. And I guarantee you that if in a year's time, if every month when you come back you pick out 2 or 3 people, if you are not highly successful at the end of the year, you probably need to go get a regular job because you're not listening.
Yes.
Because people can't wait to tell you something. That's just what successful people do. Just want to tell you things.
Yes. If you had to sum up your involvement in Project Alberta and all the different boards that you've been a part of and the work that you're doing now, if you had to sum up that whole experience into one word, what word would that be?
Learning. Because I've learned from so many people. When I went on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, first African American in Oregon, I walked in the boardroom in 1986 for the first time, and there were CEOs in this town that wouldn't even shake hands. But it wasn't bad, because I just walked around on the other side of them and said, "I'm Sam Brooks, who are you?" And they kind of looked, and we went on from there. And there were lots of folks who, on the other hand, Bill Nato, when I walked in, he was the first person of color on the board, period. Bill came over and said, "Welcome to the board. We've been waiting for you." That's the Nato family. Now, Bill's Japanese, I'm an African American. Why would Bill be interested in what happens to me, period? He's not an African American. Well, it wasn't about what my ethnicity was. It was all about your dedication to working hard and getting things done in the community. And that's what successful people do. They look for people who get things done. And so when you find those people, regardless to who they are, they will be helpful to you, and it doesn't matter. You find the people that want to see what you do and help you become better. Find those people.
You were quoted as saying, "I want people to have hope." I'm in regards to what Alberta is today and looking forward into the future. What does hope look like?
Hope looks like there are other people that have walked in those shoes and they've been able to be successful. So I can walk, and I have a good feeling that I will be able to be successful and make this work. It doesn't help you a lot when sometimes it holds up when you don't see anybody being successful, in particular it looks like you just getting it done.
Yeah.
When you do, it's that extra push that says, if they can do it, I can do it. I can even do more. Then it helps. Sometimes it's not somebody like you, it could be somebody else. Again, I knew in the case of Bill Nato, the things that happened to the Japanese in the internment camps. Mm-hmm. They took all their property. People went over to the internment camps over in Eastern Oregon. They came back and worked their way back up, and they own a ton of stuff downtown. I just said, I like that style. Mm-hmm. You know, people did you wrong, but you came out ahead in the end. And Bill used to say to me sometimes, you know, we'd sit and talk, just chit-chat, and he said, you know, I say I'm on the board and we not sit together. And he said, I know they don't like me. What are you talking about? You always say, he said, but I'm getting it done anyway. That's it. Great. And I got the message. You can get past the things where and a lot of people love Bill Nato because he did a lot of changing of all the stuff downtown, Portland, is that it's not necessary when a person walks in the room that they like you. You do the things that you're supposed to be successful. They'll come around. You'll be just fine. I know that at one retreat, I mentioned that story about some people not shaking hand, and the president of U.S. Bank was at that meeting. He said, who was it, Sam? Who was it? I said, well, I don't think there's any point for me to name the people who it was. I mean, there's no point to it. He said, well, I guarantee you there isn't anybody in Portland that would do that now. And so I understood. I agree with that. But that was a phase that people were at where they put you in a little corner because of just not a comfort level with who you were. Maybe as an African, maybe a person who'd never been aboard. I don't know all the particulars, but you can work your way past that.
Great.
Drop the mic now.